Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Blind Ambition with Jack Kelly. It's your friend Rick from Blind, and today we have Gal Josefsberg, who's the Vice President of Product and Operations of the cloud platform at Guidewire Software. He's a product executive with more than 20 years of experience in product management, product marketing, business development, and engineering at startups and tech companies, including Verint, Model N, Baynote, Social Chorus, Oracle, and more. And for those of you that don't know, Guidewire is a leading provider of software for property and casualty insurers. They manage things like billing, policies, claims, and the company combines digital core analytics and machine learning to deliver a platform as a cloud service to more than 540 insurers in 40 countries around the world. So thanks, Gal, for coming on the show.
No problem. Happy to be here.
I'm going to get right to it if you'll allow us. You've had a front row seat through 2 acquisitions, 1 IPO. It's very rare in the tech industry, actually, to kind of see through an exit. And so I want to pick your brain there in terms of how the product management function or how your, career role might have changed. Was it different being a product owner? And has it changed over time depending on the company's stage there?
Definitely. So, and I mean, if you follow my career progression, that's literally the answer to your question, right? Because I started out at a company called Blue Pumpkin Software right out of college as an engineer. But I was employee number 6, right? And so when you're employee number 6, you can say that you're an engineer, but really you're doing anything and everything. I think literally my first day I was assembling furniture. And so I sort of accidentally became a product manager at Blue Pumpkin because we hired this product manager and she was amazing. And I kept on asking her, like, why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? I can build this in a weekend if you let me. And then finally, about 2 years in, when she had headcount, she's like, you know what? If you're such a, are we allowed to say smartass on this podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. We encourage it.
All right. If you're such a smartass, why don't you come work for me? And so, but still at a startup, it was, I'm a product manager, but I'm also going to do tech support and professional services and all that. And, so that was sort of the first 5 or 6 years of my career. And I don't really think I knew exactly what a product manager does, because at a startup, you do everything. And it was only after the acquisition that I started working for a head of product management that was like basically saying that, like, I don't understand why you're doing all these things, Gal. I want you to focus on product management. And so, yeah, it was a really big shift between, yeah, you're a product manager, but also do these 10 other roles, to no, you're a product manager, come up with a strategy for your product, own a day-to-day pricing and all that. Is huge transition. And I think people really underestimate that difference between small and large companies as to how well defined your role is.
Well, Cal, maybe also to level set a little bit. When you say project manager, so for people who aren't really familiar, what's involved? What's like the day-to-day, whether for yourself or just generally? So people who might be interested in going to that field, they could get a lens through it.
And just to be clear, I mean, at Blue Pumpkin, I was doing project management and product management, as a lot of other things, as I mentioned. Once the transition occurred, it was just into product management. So the difference between those things, project manager, sorry, if there's project managers out there, they may resent me for saying it, but it's a lot of herding cats, right? It's a lot of like, okay, did you get this done? Are we ready to go? Hey, I need to go talk to this person and find a solution, because otherwise my project won't keep moving forward. But it's a very specific project that you're moving forward. Whereas with a product manager, you own the product. What are the features I need to build? How do I prioritize them? What is my roadmap and such? Now, at a small enough company, usually they don't have project or program managers. So you, the PM, the product manager, you're doing that job in addition to your own. At a large company like Guidewire, there's a very well-defined and very capable project and program management team that basically takes that work. And so as a product manager, you no longer have to do that. You're just focusing on what is it that I need to do for my product as a whole instead of for this one project or release. Did that make sense?
Absolutely. And so for people who want to do that, are there certain skills that you need to do that, certain temperaments?
They're very related, honestly, and I think there's a lot of commonality, but product managers typically, I think, are slightly more technical. A lot of times they come from the engineering fields. They have knowledge of the industry that they work in, because again, they're trying to build the right product. They're thinking about features and functionality. Project managers are more about coordination, so they're more aligned with like coordinating people, communicating, cross-functional management, and so on. They're more managing people than they are managing products. And so while there is overlap, I would say product is more technical and project or program manager is more a coordination. Again, sorry, I feel like I'm doing a disservice to project management. So if I get any angry emails, my apologies in advance for anybody listening to this.
So when you first met with your head of product management and they, pulled you aside and said, "Hey, why are you doing all of these things?"
Right.
Can you walk us through that transition period? Was it, scary in the sense of, oh, wow, maybe there is kind of a formal, you know, structure or kind of a quote unquote typical sense of what a product manager might be, and I'm not it. How did you kind of navigate that transition, so to speak?
Yeah, it was a bit of terrifying imposter syndrome in the beginning, and especially because he said, his name was John, by the way, so if I refer to that, he said like, stop doing this, stop doing this, stop doing this, stop doing this, and in my mind, I'm like, well, that's 70% of my job. Like, am I getting fired because how am I adding value now? So yeah, it was scary, and also as a product owner, I kind of felt like I was benefiting from doing all these things because if you're the product owner and the tech support and the professional services manager and the project manager for your product, you have a lot of control. But at the same time, you don't really have a lot of time to do the things you need to do. So at first, it was terrifying, 100%. But over time, I recognized the fact that it actually allowed me to be a much better product manager. For example, I didn't have any time to focus on pricing previously. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, pricing, that's an important part of being a product owner. We were building our roadmap like 3 months at a time. Right now I could focus on a longer term strategic roadmap. So while I offloaded all of these other things, I also basically began doing a full-time product management role. So it was both terrifying and gratifying at the same time, but terrifying first. I thought I was going to lose my job, to be honest with you, because you have a new boss, and your new boss is telling you like 70% of what you're doing is wrong. Don't do it anymore. Like, what's the first thing that goes through your mind? You're like, oh my God, I'm horrible at this. So it's quite a transition.
I mean, the stereotype, and I'm going to poke you in the eye a little bit. The stereotype of product managers is that they're often in meetings, they're setting roadmaps and telling software engineers what to do. They're on calls and meetings with, researchers and trying to figure out, what the customer wants and that kind of thing. But you mentioned these very technical aspects that are very related to the business side as well, in terms of pricing and almost kind of this operational sense. Can you walk us through that aspect of being a product manager? How did you learn how to figure out how to, you know, do the pricing, for example, or which customer to profile to target with, what you're adding to your roadmap and et cetera?
Let me separate out is this really part of product management from the how did I learn to do it?
Okay.
But is it part of product management? Very much so, right? And by the way, it's also going to depend a little bit about, size of the company. Is it consumer? Is it enterprise and so on? But if I'm a product owner and I'll say this to people on my own team, right? If a product manager comes to me and says, "Hey, I need to build this," I'm like, "Okay, are customers willing to pay us more money for this?" Like, I mean, as a part of a product manager, your role is to prioritize the work that these scarce resources called engineers are going to do, right? And if you cannot answer, is this valuable or not? And value in business is, are people willing to pay for it? So how can pricing not be part of your job? Now, different companies, you may not have complete ownership of pricing. There may be a pricing committee, there may be product marketing, but how can you as a product owner not be involved in pricing and still do your job? Now, again, if you're running platform services, maybe that's not as open to pricing. But if you're running a consumer service, absolutely, you should at least be interested in it and figure out, like, why am I building different tiers of my product? Should there be a free tier? Like, to me, not just the pricing, but like, how do we sell this? Is it a freemium offering? Is it enterprise software? Like, if you think that in this day and age, product management can just spend their time with engineering, absolutely wrong, right? Like, you should absolutely be spending, even marketing, right? How is this product going to be spoken about in the market with customers? Like, that is part of your job. Absolutely. So how did I learn to do it? Badly at first, because I was an engineer, right? And I didn't know anything about this. And so when I joined, by the way, the company that bought Blue Pumpkin at the time was called Witness. They later were acquired by a company called Verint. So when I joined Witness, or Verint, whatever you want to call them, the head of product management there, started teaching me a little bit about this, and I picked up some of it. And then when I turned to a company called Model N, Model N is the first company where I got promoted to a director level, where they said, "Hey, listen, you're not just in charge of a product. We also want you to be in charge of some of the strategy. How do we get into this new market and so on?" And I was like, "Okay, I'll try." And I didn't succeed very well. And the CEO of Model N, really one of my great mentors, suggested that I go to graduate school and get an MBA. And so that's what I did. I have to say, it's not clear to me that the MBA completely taught me all of these things, but it certainly gave me a good grounding in, like, pricing, right? We just talked about that. Marketing, basic economics of scale, stuff like that, previously I knew nothing about. Even how to read a finance, a balance sheet, right? Like, that was part of what I taught and part of what I learned in graduate school. And so that helped me quite a bit. And again, a lot of it is also through mentors, right? So at Model N specifically, there were 2 or 3 people outside of just the CEO who really taught me how to do these things. And then again, part of it was graduate school.
It's interesting because, like, having the MBA, but also I think it seems valuable hearing you talking about your early stage career by doing like 7, 10 different things. That helped you learn how to do better your job better, because
Right.
thinking, how can you be a product manager if you don't really know all the other things, right? It almost seems you need that.
Yes, and yes, for
Yeah.
sure, it helped me a lot. But also, and this is, I think, one of the difference between big companies and small companies, right? The smaller the company, the less official training they have, right? So Blue Pumpkin Software, like I said, employee number 5 or 6, it's learning by doing, which is great in some cases, but you miss out a lot on stuff like pricing and business cases, right? Whereas larger companies, even Guidewire, for example, we help our product managers, we teach them more about how to do this. Some companies have formal programs where they teach a product manager how to do their job. And so that's one of the trade-offs I think people have to keep in mind when they go to a small company versus large company. Small company, you learn by doing, but that may leave gaps that you then need to remedy yourself as you go, as you get promoted. Large companies give you a lot more of that formal training and education, but you don't get to do as much. So I don't know. I think there's a trade-off there.
It also depends on a person's personality. Some people love juggling 5 different things at once.
Right.
Others feel that's like torture to have to do 5 things. Just let me do my one thing, be an expert at it, and that's it. So I imagine too that big firm, small firm, lots of different projects, just a few or one.
Very much so. And again, I'm maybe horribly overgeneralizing here, but small company, it's do 10 things at once, but you're not getting to do any of them very well, right? Just get them barely done and move on to the next thing. You get a lot more time to do stuff at a large company. I still have to juggle a lot of things, but less so than I did at startups, I think.
I mean, I'm going to get really like in the weeds and tactical here. Let's say I'm a super ambitious person that wants to get into product management. You know, as I'm thinking about applying to different positions out there, you know, what do you think makes sense for someone that's kind of, you know, maybe a newbie product owner, wants to be a product manager for the first time? Maybe they're coming from another industry or they're coming from business school. You know, should they work at a large company that they already know, that they're a company of, maybe it's the flagship product, or should they kind of, you know, go the other route of the startup where they can learn by doing, do many things at once, or is it somewhere in between?
That's a really good question. I'd say there's a number of good paths, right? First of all, I'd say one of the best ways to get into product management is to work at a company in some other role. And then
Oh,
again, what I'm hiring for right now is I need technical skills, obviously. I need product skills and I need industry skills. And so, listen, not everybody's going to have all three of those, and especially as somebody trying to break into product management, you're certainly not going to have all three of those. But if you can at least show me that you have the other two, then I can skip over the fact that you don't have any project management skills. So if you are at a company and this company is already doing something and you have some technical skills, you went and you've got some online courses, or maybe you're coming from engineering, you are coming to me saying, listen, I have the technical skills and I already work at this company. So I know how our product works. Therefore, can you just teach me how to be a product manager, right? So to me, that's usually the best way to become an entry-level product manager, right? Which is I'm going to transfer over within my company because I can prove to you that I have the domain knowledge and the technical skills, and you give me the product management skills. Does that make sense?
no, absolutely.
There are other tracks, right? So people go to business schools, but I find that only the larger companies recruit product managers with no product management experience straight out of business school. So some of the larger tech companies, and even non-tech, obviously, have a formal track where they recruit from some of the larger business schools. But even then, I think it's preferable to get into product management the other track, which is get a job at the company and then try to transfer over to product management. So if you are at Guidewire, for example, if you are working at Guidewire Professional Services or Guidewire Sales or Guidewire Solution Consulting, those are actually great places for me to poach product managers from, because huge industry knowledge, great technical skills. I can teach them how to be a product manager.
I mean, you kind of alluded to this, that as your career trajectory or over time as a product manager, it necessarily changes, right? From when you're an individual contributor or you're an early stage product manager, then you became a director and now you're a vice president. You know, how has your kind of role as a product manager changed as you've kind of risen through the ranks, as you've, you know, kind of grown in your career?
So the entry level or individual contributor product managers, you're much more concerned about execution. And I know that in theory, we call them product owners. You own your product, you make all the decisions, but the reality is that you don't, right? The reality is that it's usually somebody above you who's handed you down a vision. And depending on company, you do have some freedom to experiment, to suggest your own roadmap and backlog, no doubt. But the reality is that you're mostly concerned with execution, right? You're working there day to day. How do we build these features? What are the right features to prioritize? The higher up you go, the more you change from the day-to-day execution to what is the strategy. And then at my level, it's what is the vision, right? Because what I'm doing right now at Guidewire, like I'm not going to get into the actually I shouldn't, but I still do. If any of my team is watching this, I apologize.
Yeah.
But I still love product, and so I get involved in the day-to-day as much as I can, but I just don't have as much time for it. So a lot of what I do now is, what is the vision? Why are we building what we're building, right? What is the goal? And then I give it to my managers and to my individual product managers to say, these are my goals. How do you all want to accomplish these things? Like, we have a big goal for this year around building a marketplace or doing your own CI/CD. If you don't know Guidewire, that means nothing to you, and that's okay. But and so I'll go to my manager and say, like, hey, this is the goal. How do you and your team want to accomplish this, right? And the manager translates that into a strategy, and the product managers translate that into individual features that we're going to build. But yeah, that's been the main difference, and it's tough because I'm a little bit of a control freak, and I want to write every story and look at every feature, but you also have to learn to like sit back and be like, okay, you guys know this better than I do. You tell me how we're going to build this.
Got it. And it seems like as your career goes on, you're also spending a lot more time not doing, the kind of hands-on product management, and you're doing things like recruiting. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
can you give us a window into how you recruit product managers? You've mentioned an easy way that you recruit is finding others that are at the company already, right? And you're just teaching them how to become a product manager. But, walk us through kind of that team building.
It depends on, so I'll tell you sort of my overall philosophy, and then I'll talk a little bit about the mechanics. The overall philosophy I have is it depends on the level you're recruiting, right? If you're going to recruit entry level, I love recruiting either from within the company or even interns. We now have product management interns that we occasionally recruit and make into an entry level product manager, and they've been great. If I want to recruit somebody a little bit more senior, then I will recruit, again, I'll try to recruit from within the company, but from roles that are adjacent to product management, like solution consulting, professional services, and so on. I always prefer to promote from within, but in some cases you have to go outside, and then you have to work with the recruiter, and you have to really target the recruiter and say, like, I need somebody with these kinds of skills, with this kind of background, right? Because product management is one of those, it's a little bit more ambiguous than some other roles. And so I really want to tell the recruiter, like, I would like to see, somebody that had a product manager role for at least 3 years doing this in this kind of industry with this kind of technology. Otherwise, you just won't get the candidates you're looking for. And then I will say that and I've shamelessly stolen this from Facebook and Google, but on the interview process, you really just have to, again, product management is a more ambiguous role. So it's not like engineering where you can bring somebody in and just do some leak code questions and move on. Like, a lot of times product management interviews will just descend into what I think is useless chaos of like, oh, what'd you do last summer? Like, that's not very helpful, right? So we have very structured interviews where we say, like, this is the hypothetical problem I want you to solve. I'm going to rank you based on these 3 dimensions, and then we have a score, and do we hire or not, right? Because again, we want to make sure that the product managers we're hiring can solve product management problems. And so we give them hypotheticals like, you're the product manager for this product. How would you bring a new product to market? What are the features you would prioritize? How would you write these features into requirements? Rather than just talking to them about, what'd you do 5 years ago in your career?
No, that makes a lot of sense, because my impression, admittedly, I don't have that same technical background, and certainly not in product management, but my naivety, or my understanding as it is right now, is sometimes these product manager interviews, they can get almost philosophical, right? In terms of
Right.
You know, you're presented with a business problem or a product, and you're just asked a lot of these open-ended questions
Right.
of, you know, how would you improve this product? And that's quite literally the question.
Right.
And you know,
That's
for
the
someone
job of
like
product
me, I,
management.
yeah, like how do you approach that type? Can you teach me how to think like a product
Mhm.
manager? Like how do you approach that type of open-ended question? And you know, how do you attack that problem, so to speak?
So, I mean, if you, the way to think about a product manager, first of all, what are what are you optimizing towards? And in almost all cases, you're going to be optimizing towards more revenue, right? Sell more
Sure.
money. But that's always a good question to ask at the beginning, right? When they give you that question, ask them like, what am I optimizing towards, right? Makes you sound really smart, right? Because am I optimizing towards getting more market share, reducing costs, going into another vertical, right? It's a smart question to ask at the beginning, gives you a little bit of time to think about it. And it starts having this conversation because, and all kidding aside, like that is what you as a product manager should be thinking about. What am I optimizing for? Like I'm going to be making decisions on priority, on features towards what goal, right? And is it just more revenue? Is it more revenue from new customers, from existing customers? Like these are important questions. So right away, start with that. What am I optimizing towards? What am I trying to achieve here? And then, you know, if I'm in my normal job, I also look at the resources I have available. But if in an interview, typically I would start with, okay, so let's look at this product. How is it being used? Who's using it? What value are they getting out of it? I'll give you a good example. We did this product management workshop where we talked about Uber, right? And we said, what is the value of Uber? And everybody started talking about, oh, it's, you know, people using their own cars. That's how they revolutionize this. And we're like, no. Like, why do you use Uber? It's because of the app. It's because it makes it convenient. If taxis had the same app, I wouldn't use Uber, right? So what is the value of Uber? It's not that it was using other people's cars. It was the fact that it made getting car rides easy and reliable. I didn't have to have my wallet with me. So identify the value that you're delivering, and then how can I build more value? And then that goes right back to the what am I optimizing towards, right? Am I optimizing towards hitting a new vertical and so on? So start with those things in mind of like, what am I optimizing towards and what value am I currently delivering? Why do people like my product? And you can start sort of answering that question. But it is very much a philosophical question, right?
And it's almost like a very kind of, you know, I have some experience with like the management consulting type like case interview, but it's almost that to like another degree, the product manager interview, in the sense that it's an open dialogue and you're solving a problem out loud, right? And
And don't be
I
afraid to
mean,
be daring as long as you justify, as long as you show your work, right? Because
right.
it's a hypothetical. Who knows what the right answer is? But ask a lot of questions. And again, don't be afraid to say, listen, I actually think in order to improve this product, I should do this, and this because it will help me this, and this. But then also ask the interviewer the right questions of like, do we have any research on this? Okay, well, we don't. I'm going to make an assumption here that, you know, this is what the research would show, right? Because these are hypotheticals. But the worst case scenario is when somebody like will go on for 10, 15 minutes about like a feature that they're going to build without having the conversation, right? Like if you want to show me you're a good product manager, ask a lot of questions, right? Because that's what a product manager does. They're curious. They're going to ask, well, what about it? Have we done any research on this? Have we looked at this kinds of users? Have we looked at this kind of feature? And the more of those questions you ask, the more you're impressing me that you are going to do the work of a product manager.
In addition to those questions, do you also have to have really good social communication skills? Because if you
Oh
want
my
to
God.
get a product to work, you need the buy-in from the software engineers, from the marketing people, from the advertising people, from the CFO. Is that part of it too, where you have to know how do I pull these levers to get people to join this cause?
100%.
Instead of just saying, okay, we want you to do it. Now do it. Right.
100%. And honestly, this was one of my issues early on in my career. I had this feeling that I'm the smartest guy in the room, and so everybody should just shut up and do what I tell them to do.
I have all the answers, right? So just listen to me.
Sorry, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a personal anecdote. Like, and this was right around the time I got hired at Model N as a director for the first time. And I was having trouble. When you're an individual contributor, product manager, you can still get away with that a little bit. But I was having trouble as a director getting anything done. And so I hired an executive coach. And I told this executive coach, like, hey, just tell me how I can get all these, and I use the bad word here, so I won't repeat it on your podcast, but tell me how to get all these dumb people to do what I want them to do. And he's like, well, that's an interesting goal.
Well, first don't call him dumb, right? Is that what the coach means?
I called him even worse, by the way, just to be clear. And he was like, that's an interesting goal. Let me think about it. So he talked to my coworkers and my boss and my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. And he came back a month later with, and he's Israeli, so this works a lot better in Hebrew, but he came back with, Gal, your main problem is that you're just a giant jerk and nobody wants to work with you. And I'm like, wow, okay. And he introduced me to something called the designated driver.
Israelis, by the way, are very to the point, right? They're very succinct. So like they don't mince words.
That doesn't sound offensive when you're an Israeli talking to another Israeli. I realize it sounds bad, but he basically said, like, oh, you know what a designated driver is? I'm like, yeah, of course. He's like, well, that's you. You think that everybody's a drunk, and if they just shut up, you can drive them home. And that's great on a Friday night if you're 22, but it's not great in a professional setting, right? In a professional setting, you have to assume competency. You have to assume positive intent. You have to ask a lot of questions. You have to understand why the other person wants what they want. Like, you got to stop. And so to your point, like, I think a lot of, especially sort of the hotshot, brand new product managers, like, I know how to do this. Everybody just needs to shut up and just let me do this. I'm like, you're going to.
And that's the worst thing possible, right? Because then even if they want to help, even if they really love the product and their heart is in it, no one wants to have something shoved down their throat, right? They want to be, wait, let's talk about it. Let me give my opinions. Let me give my insights, right? You need that buy-in. Otherwise, I'd imagine, I mean, you can still work, but it's going to be much harder.
I've watched somebody with that attitude at a director level walk into a meeting and they were 100% correct in the decision they wanted to make. I just want to be clear. 100% they were driving towards the right decision, but they were trying to find polite words.
You don't have to be polite. That's okay.
It was clear that they were being condescending to everybody in the room.
Yeah.
Like, they were basically saying things like, literally, like, just shut up and do what I tell you. And like, you just watch the entire room go like, nope, we're absolutely going to do the other thing, right?
Right.
Like,
if anything, they'll F things up. Just right. Just on purpose to show you, you know what, even if it's a great product, even if they would make more money and bonuses and stuff, just on the principle, like,
that's right.
Gal, it's so annoying. You know what? I'm going to sabotage this shit. I'm going to purposely put
100% correct. Like, I cannot emphasize this enough. They absolutely had the 100% right decision. The entire room decided to do something else because they were so condescending about it and just such a designated driver.
I bet you they didn't talk to you about that in your MBA program, right? They probably these are the things they don't talk about, like in the MBA, because like they just assume people would act a certain way. They don't realize that people are like messed up. They have an agenda. They want to do it themselves. They have an ego, right? And that could just wreck everything.
That's right. And by the way, I would also like, this is part of my background. So startups have a little bit more room for those hot shots, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're at a startup, it's a 20-person startup. The CEO is there every day. Like, you can get away with that a little bit. And a lot of startups will have that one or two superstars. And then as the startup gets bigger and bigger, you realize those superstars are actually a little bit toxic. And then you realize it more and more. And then you realize, like, no, they're killing productivity for everybody else, right? And it's kind of the same thing for the product manager, right? Like, you can get away with that a little bit at a startup when you're small. But at a larger company, at a medium-sized company, and again, especially as you go up through the ranks, no, you can't get away with that. You have to work on your communication skills. You have to work on your people skills. You're going to go nowhere without that.
What
You know,
happens is this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Rick.
I find that bit a bit interesting because I would think it'd be the other way around, where if you're joining an early stage startup, the original product idea was probably the CEOs or the
Right.
founders. And if you're the new kind of product manager, I imagine the instinct or the natural reaction of that CEO or the founder is to automatically view you, no matter what, as a hotshot product manager. Like, oh, you think you're going to come in and take my baby and know how to what to do with it.
Yep.
How do you deal with that dynamic there, or is that even a dynamic that exists out there in reality?
No, it definitely exists in reality, and it depends on the
Okay.
startup. And if you are, as a individual contributor, product manager, you don't have to worry about it as much because you're going to be doing what the CEO tells you anyways. But if you're
Sure.
joining a startup as like a director level or VP of product management, I would caution you to be extremely careful about this, right? Because I'm not going to name names, but I've joined a startup in the past where I was like, and within 2 months, I'm like, nope, I made a mistake. Because if that CEO needs to know how to let go. And if they can't let go, then you are in trouble. You can't do your job, but you'll still be blamed if something goes wrong. And that is one of the
Oof.
worst things about startups. Startups are both great, but startups can also be bad. CEOs especially, the founding CEO leaves his or her mark on the startup, right? And if that CEO cannot extricate themselves from the day-to-day and focus on what a CEO needs to do, and they're just micromanaging everybody, and that is especially true of CEOs who are not doing well. That CEO who's not doing well, the company's not doing that great, they'll focus on just that one thing they know how to do. So if they were an engineer, they'll get right into the engineering part. If they were a salesperson before, they'll try to micromanage the salespeople, and you're like, no, this is not, this can't work this way, right? So look for those teams and run away if you see that, as if you're looking at some of those jobs. I've learned that lesson the hard way.
Yeah, what about this? Kind of piggyback on what Rick was saying. What if you have the CEO, this is their brainchild, this is their baby, but you realize this product kind of sucks. Like, what happens? I mean, is there somehow like that you could just derail, can you just push it through and you realize this is not going to work? And does
No,
this happen a lot of the times where you just
yeah.
fall in love with it, but it's like, this is not going to work?
Again, I'll give you a little of a personal lesson there. If you're being recruited into a startup that's more than 10 years old, and the CEO is telling you, no, this is our year. We've been stuck at $10 million a year for the last 5 years, but trust me, this is our year. You're in the wrong place, right?
Oof.
So I'm
That's
clearly
like rooting for the Mets or one of these teams that or the Jets,
exactly.
rather. Let's
Exactly.
say that, where it's like, this year we're gonna win. This is
Year
the
we're
year.
definitely going to
This
win.
is it. We got it this year.
The fact is, not only have clearly they've made some kind of mistake, maybe it's the wrong market, but now they've got 10 years of technical debt, right? And so how likely is it that this startup that's been stuck at 10 or 20 million, whatever the number is this is really their year after 10 years? No.
Next year. Wait till next year.
Yeah, don't join that startup, right? That to me is a clear warning sign of something that you're talking about, which is the product is probably not that good, or the product market fit is not that good. Like either they 10 years plus, either they'd be growing or they should be done and out.
Well, how do you get, like, who could intercede with something like that? Like, the train is going, right? It's going full speed ahead, and everyone's afraid to go to the CEO or the executives who are behind this to say, like, hey, this isn't working. Is there any way, like you've seen throughout
Only
your
the
career,
board.
where you could just somehow stop that engine? Or
No, only the
no,
board
just
intercede, and the board
yeah,
won't. They won't. I mean, they might. In an ideal world, the board
yeah.
might, but you as the head of product going to the board and saying the CEO is running this company into the ground, like, don't expect a great career at this company.
Oh boy. I mean, I want to like get a little dangerous here and pick at that thread. Are there any other kind of red flags or warning signs that a product manager or a product executive like yourself can easily spot about a product or a company where you realize like, oh wow, like things aren't going well? Like what are those warning signs perhaps?
They'll only do a half-hour demo of the product, and usually by the salesperson. That's a warning sign because they're giving you a canned demo.
Okay.
Like,
Right.
you're coming in as a head of product. I would like to spend an entire day with the product team going over the product, right? Because I'm going to
Yeah.
own this, and I want to dive into the details. I want to know what the tech stack is. I want to know what the engineering team does day to day. Like if they're telling you, oh no, don't worry about it, we'll work all that out once you join. Like, nope, that's a warning sign. A really poor ratio of engineers to product managers. So typically your ratio should be around 6 or 7 engineers per product manager. And a lot of times you'll come in and they're like, oh yeah, we have 100 engineers. You're like, how many product managers do you have? 2. You're like, okay. But don't worry, we want to invest in product management. You're like, really? Because if you wanted to, you could have before. So that's another warning sign. And again, listen, if it's a 3-year-old startup that's growing quickly and they just haven't had time for product managers, fine. That obviously makes sense. If it's a 10-year company that never brought in product management, no, that's a warning sign. Tech stack that's all over the place, right? So it's like, oh yeah, we have some of our stuff in Azure and some in AWS and some in our own data center. We had this acquisition and we're still trying to merge the tech stack, right? Like there's a lot of these little warning signs that you can, and these are for startups specifically, right? Larger companies are different than that. But for startups specifically, that's one of the things I'd be looking at.
Oh boy.
For
Yeah,
larger
those
companies,
are.
go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, no, I was just gonna ask. Oh boy, like what is it like at a big company or a larger company?
Well, and by the way, so I don't mean to make it sound like startups are bad. Like I love startups, right? I'm just giving you some of the warning signs so you don't go into the bad startup.
Of
Um,
course.
by the way, one other thing to note about startups is that, if you look at their investors, right? Typically, by the time a startup has been around for a while, they should have investors who believe in them, and those investors should have some companies that are recognizable and doing well, right? Because if this company was attractive, then it would be attractive to investors as well, and they do their homework probably better than you do. So who are the investors in this company tells you a lot about how attractive this company is. I don't have as much experience with large companies, so I can't tell you as much. The only thing I found is like the level of how many levels of management, right? Because I find that, sorry, this is going to sound bad because I'm a manager, like extra layers of management don't help that much. One of the things I love about Guidewire, especially in the PDO, the product development organization, is that we don't have that many layers of management, right? From the lowest individual contributor all the way to Diego, my boss, we try to have 4 levels. That's it at most. And this is for like a 1,500 person team. And that to me is really appealing because it means that the VP level knows exactly what's going on. The individual contributors can easily talk to their managers and make changes. Like if that was a 10-layer team, I'd be a little worried, right? So that to me is always interesting to see like how many layers of management are there in a large company.
I mean, can you give us a sneak peek into how you hire? If I wanted to work for you, or if I wanted to work on your team at Guidewire, like what does that interview process look like? What are the things that I should really make sure to have down pat to kind of impress you and land that offer?
So Guidewire is a little bit interesting for me because I run the platform, and I'll give you
Right.
the 2-minute overview. When I joined Guidewire, Guidewire was doing this big transition between being an on-prem software provider to being a cloud software provider, right? And I run the platform at Guidewire. Sorry, I along with a number of counterparts. It's a very great team effort. And so at Guidewire, my hiring aims a little bit towards more the technical side. You need to know more about the technical aspects of running software in the cloud than you do about insurance, even though Guidewire's business is insurance. There is another
Right.
team, Guidewire, who do the product management for our insurance products. And there, you need to know more about insurance than you need to know about the technical stuff, although you still need to be technical, right? Even in that position. But for my team specifically, I need you to really understand cloud. I need you to understand how Kubernetes works. I need you to understand how observability works, networking, stuff like that. That's what my team is looking for at Guidewire. And so you need to have product management experience and you need to be very technical. And that's why at Guidewire, if you look at most of my team, a lot of them have engineering backgrounds, right? Which is not true. I think these days, I don't think it's a
Yeah.
prerequisite for product managers to have an engineering background, but specifically in my team, because it's a very technical platform team, that is almost always the case. But I still, to the discussion we had previously, you still need to have good communication skills, right? Because Guidewire's platform is so front and center with our customers that even the platform team still talks to customers on a regular basis. We go to the customer conference. It's not just an internal facing position.
Yeah, I mean, and like, how do I, in that interview process, showcase those kind of interpersonal skills or those communication skills? Is it as simple as the types of questions that I'm asking you, the hiring manager, or the certain behaviors that I'm showcasing or that I need to showcase, as I go through the steps?
But you asked an interesting question, which is it the type of questions I'm asking? I wanted you to take a step back, like just ask questions, right? Like I see way too many people
Oh,
to an interview and they don't ask questions. Like to me, when I'm interviewing product managers, the fact that this person is not asking questions, that's a huge warning sign. Like again, I sit there in interviews sometimes and this person has gone on for the last 10 minutes giving me an answer to my question. I'm like, stop. Answer it, 60 seconds, give me the answer, and then ask me, like, okay, if I ask you, like, hey, you're the product manager for Gmail, how would you improve Gmail? You should not go off on a 10-minute discussion about how Gmail can be better improved for spam filtering. You should say, well, I think currently Google is trying to move into enterprise, so I would start looking at some enterprise features. Is that what you had in mind? Or are you looking for different markets that we can go into? And then like have that kind of sorry, I don't know if I came up with the best example there, but like it should be a conversation. If you stop talking and start asking questions would be my best advice.
wow. Any other kind of tips that you almost see like people make often, and mistakes that the people often make during the interview process that you wish, oh my gosh, this candidate would just nail it if they stopped doing this?
One is come prepared to talk about the company, right? Like know that Guidewire does insurance, right? Know that Guidewire is making
Right.
the transition to the cloud, right? Like that should be obvious to you, even if you're on the platform side. This is going to be it sounds a little weird, but come prepared to talk about your interviewer. Like I always look up who I'm interviewing with. And I'm like, even if they like, and ask a little question at the beginning, like, hey, I noticed you went to Berkeley for your MBA. Like, how was that? What did you like? Right? People like talking about themselves, so do that. And then last but not least, I always like it when people ask me, like, I always reserve some time at the end of the interview and I say, like, what are the questions that you have for me, right? Have some prepared questions that are interesting, right? I had one product manager ask me this, and I thought this was fascinating. And when I talked to the other interviewers, this person asked the other interviewers the same question. He asked them all. So this was a prepared question, but it was a great one, which was, what are the top 2 things that I could accomplish here over the next 6 months that would tell you I was a really good hire?
That's a good question. I like that one.
I thought that was a great, right?
Yeah,
I
I
thought
like
that
that.
was a great
Right.
question. It made me, first of all, it was clear to me that this person is thinking about how they could be more productive and contributing. Like, And it forced me to think, and we had a good conversation about it. So I told them number one and number two, and then they recited back to me. So what I heard you say is number one and number two, and I'm guessing that's because of blah, blah, blah. It was a really great question.
That's great. And the person's making them like manifesting, I'm going to be there doing that. So
That's
for
right.
the interviewer, they're already thinking past the sale. They're thinking
Right.
already, okay, they're hired and this is what's going to happen in the next month or two.
Right.
I like that. That's a really good advice.
And again, if you have those product management exercises, like improve this product, just ask a lot of questions, right? Don't go off on a tangent for 10 minutes. You say like, hey, I think we can do this. What do you think? Would this work? Do we have any research on this? Is this the kind of user you're targeting? Again, just the more you can make a conversation, the better off you will be.
Oh, gosh, I really appreciate this. And while we're on this, um, any other kind of general interview tips that folks should have as they kind of go through the product manager, recruitment process?
Honestly, no, not that I can think of. I think just interview tips in general are, you know, relax a bit. And if you're not comfortable in having in public speaking or having these kinds of discussions, go practice, right? There's things like
Right.
Toastmasters, like, I'm sorry, having these people tell me, well, it's not fair if this person maybe doesn't interview well. I'm like, if they don't interview well, they're not going to do the job well. So if you're the kind of person who thinks to themselves, like, this is not fair, I just don't interview well, then go practice it. Go to somewhere it's like Toastmasters, go do practice interviews, like, get better at it.
Right. Oh man. I mean, these are such great tips. I really appreciate you coming on the show and kind of walking us through that whole process of how to even become a product manager and what that role looks like.
No problem. Glad I could be here. This was a lot of fun.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. This is great.